Hi, everyone. It is a pleasure meeting you. My name is Una Vernhoeven, and I'm Sitecore MVP. So thanks, everyone, for joining, getting started with SXA webinar. This talk is going to be a very business-like, so there's not going to be too much of a deep dive. We are not going to dive into the Sitecore that much, so it's really for the people who have not used SXA, who are not really aware of what it is all about. So the plan for today is what we have on the agenda is the introduction to SXA, the challenges that SXA is facing, and some assumptions and questions, how to actually get started. We're going to discuss a bit about the SXA workflow, the terminology, and also what is new in SXA 1.8. So to start with, what is actually SXA? So SXA is part of the Sitecore. It comes as a separate module, and it stands for Sitecore Experience Accelerator. And it is used to speed up the development of the sites, the production of the sites, and it also separates the structure from the design. What that means is that at the same time, it's not just that we can start building the sites, we can also start entering the content, and people can start working together at the same time. SXA is also component-based, which means that it is built on Helix principles. And the only prerequisites that you actually need to have to run SXA is you must have Sitecore, obviously. You need to have Sitecore PowerShell extension installed, and you need to have an SXA license, which is actually nowadays part of the subscription license. But before we dive deep a bit more into what is actually SXA and what you can do with it, let's go a bit back in time and see how SXA actually was progressing throughout the years. So SXA is not as new as it used to be. So it was released back in 2016 as the initial release. And as you can see, there were many, many releases from August 2016 till June 2017. Because in the beginning, there were quarterly releases from the SXA team together with some of the updates. And really, each of the updates and each of the next release had more and more things to add. So I really need to give a big shout to the SXA product team because they have really listened to the Sitecore community, and almost everything that we have suggested, they are really working on it and including everything in. So in the beginning, they have introduced the wireframe improvements. So SXA worked originally with the wireframe, and it still does. There is a new version of the wireframe nowadays. And also the facet support. And the facet support is something which is going to make your life easier when you need to use the search. Near the end of December 2016, there was also support for Azure, but also the Creative Exchange. And the Creative Exchange is the way how the front-enders are working with SXA. How do you want to manage your assets? How do you want to integrate them into Sitecore? So you can use Export Import Wizard, which was the original way, but there is also Creative Live Exchange, which you can use with the gulp scripts. After that, they have also introduced the JSON data modeling, the grid framework, and there is also the upgrade tool, which they have released, which is going to help you when you need to upgrade from one SXA version to the other. In June of 2017, there was a Creative Exchange Live, the site management tools, and they have completely re-architectured the basic theme, which was also being used across the sites. Near the end of 2017, I think the biggest changes happened with SXA. They have introduced the delegated areas, which is very useful when you actually want to share your content, to be precise, the pages. And they have also enabled the presentation and the content sharing. So it was so much easier to actually work with your data, because normally you would need to have some kind of a shared folder if you would be building it in the non-SXA way. But nowadays, you can actually just configure it, and with the right click, you can say what you want to share and which sites can actually access to that type of the content. After that, they have also introduced the component cloning, which now makes life far easier to actually create the custom renderings. They have also introduced the snippets and many, many user experience improvements. And in this year, they have really, really focused on improving bug fixing and stabilizing the product. until 1.1, when they really have surprised us and released so many things that SXA really is now a way to go. And we will cover what 1.8 is actually offering now. So after going back a bit through time, so what are the benefits of SXA? There are several key things that I would really like to address to when you as a business actually need to decide do you want to go the SXA way or not. So SXA is not just Experience Editor compatible, it is completely used by the Experience Editor. So you have a drag and drop functionality, which is actually going to help you to arrange your pages, to create your content, and it's very intuitive. It is completely Helix-based, which is nowadays the standard way of how you should implement your solutions. So even if you are not using SXA, Helix is the way to go. By having everything Experience Editor supported, that means that everything that you're doing is also marketing ready. So everything that you're dragging and dropping on your pages, on your partials, all the content that you have, you can already start in planning all your digital strategy, your personalization, your A/B testing, and that is something that is not that easy to do when you have non-SXA solution, because unfortunately those things tend to be forgotten by the end of the project, either the budget runs out or something like that. And here, in parallel with the development, you can actually planning your marketing strategy altogether. Everything is reusable. So it's not what you have only per site. You can actually mark things that you want to share across the sites. All the renderings that you have in Toolbox can be available for all other sites. If you have some custom renderings, you can decide on which sites you want to install them. So it's really, really easy to deploy them and to share them across the sites. And the best part is SXA comes with a set of themes, and it is a mobile-first approach. So everything that you have is completely responsive. It works on the desktops, it works on the tablets. So it is really easy also for the front-enders to start with it as well. But when you actually start to work with SXA, if you're completely new to it, you are going to come with you're going to face some challenges. So one of the challenges they're actually mentioned here, there is the new workflow, and not the workflow in a sense of the Sitecore workflow. We are talking about the way of working. We are going to discuss that as well. There is a new terminology which has been introduced, so which is quite, well, not as different than what we used to use, but there are a couple of words that you need to be aware of how they're used. They have also introduced a new structure, and there is way less coding for the developers than in non-SXA solutions. So how does the workflow without SXA look? So it is a very standard approach. So we would be getting a design either from internal people or from the third-party agency. That design would be delivered to the front-end people. They would split it into pieces, start making the static HTML pages, and after that, it would be handed over to the techies, to the back-end developers, and then we would be actually start to making some things in Sitecore. But the thing with this approach is the first time that the customer is actually going to see the site and what you're doing is until it reaches either the test or the QA environment. So all these things that are happening, you know, how it goes with the design, especially front end, how is that going to look? The front end does not have access to Sitecore. You're not really sure. So not all front enders know how to write the code for the CMS, especially if they come from the third-party agencies. And then the backend developer needs to make a sense out of everything that has been handed over to, and to build the actual Sitecore implementation. And if something is wrong, then there is the entire flow of going back to the front end, bug fixing from the Sitecore side, etc. The workflow with SXA is quite different. Basically, everyone almost starts at the same time. So design can start a bit earlier, but there is absolutely no reason that everything cannot go in parallel, because you actually have the wireframe support in SXA. So design can already plan ahead how they actually want to have things. By the time the design is ready, you can already discuss with the client how they want to enter the content, how they want to use it, and you can already start defining the templates from the Sitecore side. But at the same time, the moment you're done with one template, the content editors can already start working. And it doesn't matter that the front end is not done. The front enders can actually work in parallel with everything. And you, as a Sitecore developer, can switch to the next task. And the content is being filled in parallel with everything. So the big change with SXA is that it requires a more tighter collaboration between all the parties. And that is not a bad thing, because it's not bad to actually meet your team members, in all fairness, and to work together a bit more with the content editors or with the business or with the client. And also, in the end, the content editors in the business are the people who are actually going to use all of this. So if it's easy for them, it is going to be a successful implementation. So I mentioned briefly a couple of minutes ago that there is a new terminology that is now being used with SXA. So I'm not going to mention all of them that are being used, because we are planning the deep dive SXA webinar, which is going to be on 21st, if I'm not mistaken. So that one will cover renderings and rendering variants into deep dive. But one of the things that you're going to face is the toolbox. You're going to face with the page designs and partial designs, and renderings and rendering variants. There are many more new terms, but we are going to cover those things in the upcoming webinars for SXA. So what is a toolbox? So this is something which is very SXA specific, and this is something that you will see in the experience editor. So when you actually launch the SXA page in the experience editor, on the right side, you're going to get this kind of a toolbox. And this toolbox basically has all the renderings that SXA can offer to you. So here currently the composites are expanded, but there are many, many other things. So each of these renderings are structured in a way that they actually share some kind of logic. So for example, the composites, those are the renderings that can contain other renderings. So you will end up with accordions, the carousels, the snippets, etc. For the media, you're going to find the videos and the images. For the navigation, either the main navigation or the link lists, etc., etc. And with this, you can actually drag and drop anything of this on the page, and it's going to be very easy for you to actually create the content. So what Toolbox basically is a drag and drop functionality, which is still equivalent to when we had that Add Here button in the experience editor, and we click on it and we get that pop-up. That pop-up is still there. It's just that this is far more easier to navigate around and drag and drop things, instead of searching for the placeholders and then trying to find which Add Here we actually need to press. Now, when we talk about page designs and partial designs, I would like to spend a bit more on this, because this is really the base that you will be actually facing with. So page design decides the layout of the page, and the page design consists of the partial designs and the renderings. The way how you can look into the page design are, if you remember, the presentation details. So remember what you had on the standard values in on the templates for the presentation details. That is what the page design is. And it consists from the partials, and it can also have renderings, which are content which is drag and dropped from the toolbox. Partial, on the other hand, is something similar to the page design, but partial design is part of the page design, and the content which is on it is reused across all the pages. But of course, with branching, you can also make it the page specific. So I have done, so the easiest site actually to come up with was the Sitecore site. So this is the actual navigation from the sitecore.com website. And this would, for example, in SXA be an excellent candidate for the partial. So I was mentioning briefly that the page design consists from the partial designs. So what are the partial designs that are actually being used on that website and that are repeating on other pages? So logically, that is header, that is footer. So how can we actually define this partial design, which is a header. If we look at it a bit closely, we can see that we actually have a couple of renderings here, which are being dropped from the toolbox. We have on the left side, in the left column, we have the logo, which is an image. On the right side, we can also split this. We have a row splitter and a column splitter. So we can see that this is a link list on the top right. And here we actually have the main navigation, which we can just drag and drop. And of course, we have the search button next to it. And with literally 4 drag and drops and inserting the image, we are done with our header. That's it. Once we save it, we can import it to the page design, and we are done. We don't need to touch it ever again. If we look at the footer, on the other hand, we can see that, okay, you do have a standard footer, which consists of other things. So the first partial that can be defined is actually the form, because this form repeats across all pages, at least from those that I have clicked on. So if you actually see what this partial has, if we talk about the SXA terminology, this is basically a form. And the form is placed in a container, and that container has a background. After that, you just need to fill in your content. That's it. So that is one of your partials, and this data is always present across all the pages. And then we have the actual footer, which would be the footer partial. The previous one we can actually call the contact form partial. And the footer partial has a link list. So it has the product link list, the solutions, getting started resources, case studies, and the company. So how does this actually look in Sitecore? Sitecore has, under the presentation layer, page designs and partial designs. And you can see here that I have created under the partial designs, I have created a contact form, footer, and header, where I would be dragging and dropping all those link lists. After that, I have created the page design, which is called generic, because I want all my pages to have this type of page design. And from the left side, I have the list of all the partial designs which are available. So from the left side, I can actually select which partials do I want to use on my page design. And I call it generic because all the pages are going to have this, so I want to be able to reuse this. So I'm going to have a metadata. The metadata is type of the partial design, where you can actually place all your SEO tags, the meta tags that you need. Header, in our case, that is going to be the header partial, which has the logo and 2 navigations with a search box. The contact form, which is nothing more than a simple form, and the footer, which contains several lists. After that, I can then assign when do I actually want to use this generic page design. And I will say that every template, which is the type of page, I want to use the generic design. So the next time I actually go into Sitecore and do the right click and say insert new page, which has the template called page, it's going to have out of the box the generic page design. Let's talk a bit about the renderings and the rendering variants, because once you actually create the page designs, you'll see that there's not much work to be done there, but the time where you're really going to spend is on the renderings and rendering variants. So if we look into these 2 renderings, so normally when we would be creating this in a non-SXA way, let's call it that way, we would be creating separately 2 renderings. We would be having 2 views. We are going to have some kind of front end around it, etc. One little note: if you're actually working with the renderings in SXA, all those renderings must be a control rendering, so there is no working with the renderings anymore with SXA. But if I look at these 2 renderings, I can see several things. I have an image on both sides. I have a title. There is a certain subtitle there. There is a text. One has phone, the other one does not. And there is a link. So this link also has, on the right side, it has an icon, but the other one does not. So as I said previously, in normal Sitecore way, you would be having creating 2 views, 2 renderings, 2 controllers, etc. But with SXA, you actually don't need to do that. And you actually don't need to create any kind of code to achieve this. So I already see that there is a difference in the content only in one field. And yes, visually it looks different. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a template, which is going to have these fields. And based on that, I'm going to create the rendering variants, which are actually going to manipulate how all of this is going to look. So what I'm actually going to end up with is I'm going to have, I called it demo just for these purposes. It's called the demo rendering. The demo rendering is pointing, it's actually a copy of the promo, and it's only going to use the template which we have previously defined with image, title, subtitle, text, phone, and the link. And I have defined 2 rendering variants. One is called the employee card, the other is called the government card. So the employee card is going to have a certain section, and it is going to have all the fields, including the phone, where the government card is not going to have the phone. So it's going to have all the other ones. In the next webinar, which is on 21st, we're going to go into deep dive, and we're actually going to create all of this through Sitecore and all the manipulations with the customization and rendering variants. But because this is a high overview, what we're actually going to show here is when we actually go to the experience editor, there is one catch that you can do. Every rendering variant has a thumbnail. So in the previous versions, when you would actually be working with the renderings and rendering variants, it was actually very difficult to kind of figure out what do you need to select. So, okay, in this case, we have said we're going to have the employee card and the government card. But if you were not really careful with how you were naming things, you might end up with a bit bigger list, and then you were not sure how you actually want to call certain things. But there is now a complete support since I think 1.5 version, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 1.6. They're now using the thumbnails to actually render what we are going to see. So what happens when we are actually in Experience Editor, when I drag and drop my demo in the Experience Editor, it's going to ask me to select which variant I want to use. So do I actually want to use the employee card, or do I want to use the government card? And basically, the content editor is very easily going to see what kind of content they're going to end up with. And with the manipulation from the rendering variants, you're actually going to be able to show and hide what you want to show and what you don't want to show. And it doesn't need to look like this, that everything is one below the other. Something can be on the left, something can be on the right, so you can have the link around everything. There are so many ways which we're going to cover on the 21st, how you can go about it. But the thing is, all of this can be done without writing a single line of code from the Sitecore perspective. It's just a couple of clicks away. And it's very user-friendly for the content editors. But how does this actually look when we actually drag and drop things? And I have pre-recorded this part to avoid switching between the screens. So this is basically how it looks when we open things in the Experience Editor. So as you can see on the right side, I have all the toolbox and all the renderings placed in. And now I can start drag and dropping. But based on my previous example that I was using, I said that I defined already a page design which was generic, and I have defined placeholders for the header and the footer and for the contact form. So what I want to do here is I want to use the main placeholder. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to split the main section. So I'm going to say I want to split the main one into 2 columns, and if I click a bit around, each of them has 6 columns. So it needs to be the sum of 12. But for now, I'm leaving them as they are, so just split in half. I'm going to drag and drop promo. I get a pop-up. Do I want to select already created promo that I had, or do I want to create some custom data source that I previously did not have? Once I do that, I'm completely ready to start entering the content. So here I'm actually going to see everything which rendering variants are offering me. So I can just start after drag and drop directly entering the content in the experience editor, and I exactly know how it is going to look. So in this particular case, just for example purposes, the promo was used. Of course, you can here select the image if you want to upload it. And it is basically how we always used to work with the experience editor. Of course, if the implementation was done properly. So I didn't have an image to upload, but nevertheless. And after that, you can select in other parts what you actually want to drag and drop. It can be the carousel, accordion, it can be any page content, etc. But as you can see with this drag and drop functionality, it's kind of playing with a puzzle, and you are having all these pieces that you want to put together to actually create the site. So one of the things to be a bit careful when actually doing this kind of things, because it is so easy, as shown here, you don't want to actually create a bunch of splitters with columns and rows. Consult your front ender first, because keep in mind that all the renderings that you're dropping here are renderings, and you don't want to have, I think 30 is kind of advisory limit. You don't want to have performance issues in the future, although SXA is very, very strong on caching. So you can actually cache per rendering very easily through settings. We will cover those parts as well in the next webinar. But as on one hand, it's so very easy to drag and drop it, so it's easy from the user's perspective. It also may be a bit difficult how to do it the right way. So we have seen what SXA has created up until now, and other webinars will show a more deeper dive in when we will go to Sitecore. But let's see what SXA 1.7 has to offer to us. SXA 1.7 has introduced the accessibility compliance. So just a reminder, not all renderings have this, so some of the renderings have it. So they have started introducing tab ordering that you can actually easier navigate through the components with a keyboard, and you can actually use the tab order to skip the content, and also the one which is not visible on the page. But as I have mentioned, some of the renderings do have it, but not all of them yet. One of the things that was always a bit problematic, and one of the complaints, mainly from the front-ender side, was that you were kind of not allowed to change the HTML that you were using. And the thing is, you could have done it if you would have created the copies, but that would have required a bit of manual process, even though with the PowerShell scripts and all the automation which came from SXA 1.6 and continued later on, you were still able to do that. But now there is even a bigger automation which came into place. And that one was, instead of actually creating all the duplicates and that you do the manipulation, you can actually now customize the default out-of-the-box renderings with a couple of very simple clicks. So basically what you need to do is you need to create a custom view folder. So in this case, you need to basically copy what you actually want to have. So your new folder must have the same structure as it is in the root folder. And you will need to copy the web config and paste it in the folder that you have created. And afterwards, in the content editor under the settings, you can actually provide a path to the folder that you have created. So we have created a folder called custom views, and we are providing our custom rendering path there. So what SXA is going to do is, if there is, for example, promo.cshtml, if you have promo.cshtml in the custom views, it's going to pick that one instead of the default one. And if that one doesn't exist in your custom views, it's going to fall back on out-of-the-box one. So that way, you can actually now customize every HTML that you want. And the best part is, you can do it per site. So you can actually end up with the same functionality, but a different HTML. And just by pointing to the different folder, of course, copying the view files that you need to have with the original structure, and then you can edit and place any HTML that you want. Another really cool thing, and this is something that normally we would need to build by ourselves, that is cross-site linking. I think everyone knows or has to build, or you were in a position that you actually had to build that. When content editors actually want to link the items between sites, so they're actually, for example, currently on a Belgium site, and there is a certain page on the Dutch site, and they want to link to it, and that was never a nice thing to do unless you actually provided a custom code for it. So, and that is something which is completely new in 1.8. The cross-site linking now comes out of the box. So SXA is completely taking care of that. And it's using the target host name for it. And you can actually define through the administration, is the site linkable from the other site? Can you actually use it? And it has also introduced the token linkable homes that you can actually use for something like this. So SXA has always used the wireframes for everything that was done, but now the wireframes got redesigned, and I think, and we can now say goodbye to the Comic Sans because that is how it was actually looking before. So now it is very lean, it is very sleek. So they're now, so if you're actually now dealing with a wireframe, this is actually something that you can actually show to the end customer because it looks way more professional and it is way more UX friendly. So, and also there is another very nice detail. You do not have anymore to switch the site to the wireframe. You can actually, now there is a toggle mode and you can actually select the mode that you're working in. And at the same time that your front-end developers can stay in a different mode. So you can actually kind of switch it for a user, which is a really cool thing to do. The toolbox that we have seen now can actually be completely reorganized. So SXA has also provided with the PowerShell scripts that you can actually remove what you don't want to use, but at the same time, now you can completely rearrange how you actually want to have your toolbox. For example, like here you have the favorites, maybe there is something that the end users are using way more that you want to have on the top, maybe some kind of functionality makes a bit different sense for the end users, maybe some things that they actually cannot find that easily or they forget where they are. So now you can actually completely reorganize, and not just reorganize, you can very easily remove the things that you actually do not want to use anymore. And front-enders and everyone are going to be very happy that SXA 1.8 has arrived with the Bootstrap 4 support. So here you can actually completely define how you actually want to have per device. This has already existed from before, but previously it was just the Bootstrap 3 foundation and the grid. Of course, SXA does not ban you from it's not that you need to use these grids. I mean, it is advised because you can do everything with these grids, but sometimes there is a need to create a custom grid, and that is actually very easy to do. And when we say the Bootstrap grid, an emphasis on grid. So if I say the Bootstrap grid, it does not imply that your carousel is actually going to have the Bootstrap HTML. It's just the grid system, so the columns and rows. And we will go through this for the rendering variants in the deep dive on 21st, but an additional thing that you can now actually add is you can literally now inject the entire rendering into the rendering variant, which is something that was not possible before. You would need to use the references, so you kind of reference and a reference and a reference, and now you can just say, okay, give me this rendering, and bam, it's there. So it is getting far more easier to actually manipulate with the content that you actually want to show and to have. And the best part is it doesn't matter if it does not exist in design. You do not need to build it customly because it comes out of the box. But even though SXA offers many, many things, there are certain assumptions, and I placed 4 of them. And this is something that you will, depending in which field you're working, are you doing pre-sales, are you doing consultancy, are you working with a team, etc. So I would like to address these 4 points. The 4th one actually came as a question of from yesterday, so thank you, Amanda, for that. So one of the things that has been going around a lot is that it is much faster to develop in a non-SXA way. So in a standard Sitecore way, because SXA takes time. Now, the thing is, yes, you need to get used to SXA. You need literally one project to get your head around it and to understand how it works and to see where all the configurations are. And documentation is getting better and better. But it is completely not true that it is faster to write the code than to drag and drop. So there is a lot of predefined functionality in SXA. For example, navigation comes out of the box. The entire linking engine comes out of the box. Search comes out of the box. You don't need to write your own search. Indexing, you can define under the settings, comes out of the box, and it's compatible completely with Solr. So there is absolutely no way that it is faster to write the code than actually to drag and drop. But your developers must know how SXA works. And now we're entering into the domain as when do developers have time to learn versus the actual billable work that they're doing. So it's kind of on the company, to be honest. A frequent thing that I was actually hearing from some of the developers, some of them were saying, I want to write a code. I don't feel like the real developer. I feel like I'm right-clicking and playing around in Sitecore. I'm a developer and not right-clicker and those kind of things. And I agree, developers should write the code, but I don't want developers to create me another header with another navigation after 15 years of Sitecore. I mean, in all fairness, it is 2018, and if we still need to write the estimates, how to write navigation and how to write links, and that header will cost 8 hours of the day, I would rather have a developer writing the connection with the CRM, third-party integrations, and those kind of things than to spend time building me another page template and writing another linking resolver and those kind of things. Their time can be utilized way better, unless you always want to write the same thing over and over again. A lot of companies actually have their own frameworks, and this is not an uncommon thing. They actually have their own frameworks, which are kind of like Kickstarters, so they can actually very easy start a project. They can develop in a much faster way, and they prefer to use that. But the thing is, when you're dealing with a company who has its own framework, who is going to maintain that code? And is that framework always maintained up to the latest? And is it backward compatible? The thing is, when you're actually dealing with the framework, you need to think about the upgrades and you need to think about the code maintenance. So you cannot just replace the DLLs. Okay, in some cases you can, but in theory, you should do the full testing and to see something breaking. But in the end, client is going to pay for that. So if you're actually going the SXA way, it's not up to you to take care of these kind of things. So as long as you haven't changed something in the core of SXA, and when I say change in the core of SXA, change the default files, or heaven forbids, decompile the DLL, copy-pasted the code, and overwritten it, you should be good to go, because this is part of Sitecore. And when there is a new release, you're going to get the upgrade scripts, and the entire code maintenance is on Sitecore. It's not on you. So actually, the less customization you have, it's easier for you to upgrade because the code is not yours, it's theirs. And honestly, I'm not complaining about that. And the other question which arrived yesterday was, how does SXA compare to the other partner accelerators and solutions which are also Helix-based and component-built? I mean, I'm not going to, in all reality, it's very difficult to advise what clients want to go for. My personal preference is to go for the SXA because it's part of the Sitecore platform. So Sitecore owns it and Sitecore builds it. And it is the part of the subscription license. And I do not need to worry about the upgrades, as I said for the previous remark, because now everything, all the Sitecore parts are now being released all together. So SXA previously was not following the Sitecore releases, but now they go together completely with Sitecore. So when the latest SXA is out, it goes together with the latest update of Sitecore. So from that perspective, SXA is always going to be up to speed with everything which is happening with the Sitecore as a platform compared to other partner accelerators. So it all comes down to how much you need to pay for it, how much is license going to cost you, and here you have the full Sitecore support. And if something is not working there, and if there is a bug which cannot be found, is it on the Sitecore side? Is it on the other accelerator side? My personal preference, honestly, is I just go always with the SXA and do not even consider other accelerators due to these kind of reasons. One thing to keep in mind, and especially because SXA is really attached to the version of Sitecore, is the compatibility table. So as Sitecore has the compatibility table with different .NET versions, there is also a compatibility table for the SXA. So when you're actually installing it, pay attention to which version of Sitecore the latest or any other version of SXA applies. I have also placed here some of the sites which are built in SXA. They're way more than this. Of course, the most famous one, because it was featuring on the Digital Destiny Tour, was the L'Oreal. But you can actually find all these sites on the customer experience on the Sitecore site. There are now lots of sites built on SXA. And in the past, and when I say in the past, it's let's say year and a half ago, there was always an assumption that you cannot build anything big with SXA. It's just for the small sites, it's for the landing pages, it's for the microsites, and you should not touch or build anything big with this. The thing is that is just not true anymore. And if you actually go through the Sitecore site, and if you go to the experience awards that were won, and if you actually read the case studies and the white papers, and everyone who has actually built an SXA, browse their sites a bit, and you will see that there is way more complex functionality there, which has been achieved with SXA that you actually do not have or you do not see on the non-SXA sites. The latest version of documentation has included the best practices. So I would strongly advise you to really read this and stick to it as a holy grail. And the reason why I'm saying this is it's very easy to make a mistake if you actually don't know what you're doing. And these best practices are going to make sure that you're always up to speed with the upgrades. So if you stick with these principles, you should be your upgrades are going to be very easy. And you're not going to come into some weird issues like performance issues, the functionality issues, etc., etc. Except the doc site, you of course have the Sitecore SXA channel, and it is very active, and the product team is there, and you can actually very easily reach out to everyone with a question. And of course, you have the Sitecore Stack Exchange, where you can ask questions about SXA. And even if someone doesn't reply there, you can always post it in a Slack, and people will reply to it. I have mentioned some of the things that SXA actually is giving you, but I would like to address some of them again and some that I did not mention. So you have the entire content sharing. So you can have the global content sharing. You can have multi-site sharing. You can have per-site sharing. You can share certain pages, which are called the delegated areas, etc. Everything is reusable. Everything you do can be arranged in that way that other sites can use it. So for example, if you're a big corporation and you're currently launching, let's say, EMEA region, and you want to have a certain country to have something specific, you can do that. But at the same time, if one of the countries says, this looks very interesting, I would like to have this, you actually don't need to copy paste the code or anything. You just need literally to install the module that you have created on the separate site, and you're good to go. All of this is going to actually cause less development on the Sitecore side, because really a lot of things are covered by SXA. Thanks to that, as I was mentioning in the beginning, the time to market. And in all reality, this is why everyone buys Sitecore, because of the personalization, because of the user experience, and they want to do cool stuff as a digital strategist. With SXA, they can do that much faster. The cross-site linking, which has been released in 1.8, which is a really, really big feature. And of course, the full experience editor compatibility, the theme branding. So the themes are not something that I was mentioning here, but the way how the themes work is you can actually create your entire brand, in a sense, how you want things to look, how you want them to be styled. And you can share them across sites, like I was mentioning, perhaps EMEA region. But then each of the sites can actually have the possibility to adjust the front end how they want without actually interfering with other sites. And of course, the best part of everything, it is Sitecore supported. And with this, let's switch to questions. Kelly, can you please read the questions, because I cannot actually see them.
No worries, everybody. So I'm just going to switch over to our question mode and select that one, publish that. So we do have one question here from Isabella, and that is, SXA out of the box supports site sharing. Do you know if there is any possibility / any hacks I can do to share, e.g. one site between multiple tenants in a similar way like a global folder works in non-SXA implementations? I want to share all the templates and modules, not only content, so delegated areas don't seem to be an option.
So the site sharing is across the tenants, but you actually can accomplish with the small tweaks. But what was the part with the delegated areas? Can you repeat that? Sorry, Kelly.
I'm not actually too sure. I've just got, I want to share all the templates and modules, not only content, so delegated areas don't seem to be an option.
Delegated areas is content. So delegated areas is basically, those are your pages which you can delegate. So basically what delegated areas are, let's say that you have a certain news pages and you can delegate them to the certain site. So basically what then happens is there is like a copy of the content from site A to B, but you can't actually edit the content. So it all depends how you delegate it. So do you want to just leave it as a delegated area, or do you want actually to lock it? And then what happens is that every time you change something in the site A, you're basically, it's like a link to the site A. It's just the same content. So I'm not really sure what you mean by delegated areas are not shared. Delegated areas are for the pages.
And Isabella, if you haven't already joined our Slack channel, the Women of Sitecore Slack, feel free to join that. And you can post questions and stuff related to the webinar in the Slack channel as well, if you do need some further information on that. Okay, so we just have another question here from Amanda, so I'm just going to switch over to that, hopefully. Let me see. Sorry, guys, that was in the wrong screen. All right, so we've got another question here from Amanda, and that's, any tips or lessons from using Creative Exchange with a UX or design group who is very isolated from the Sitecore stream?
Well, the thing is, with SXA, so you can actually, you have two options. So, of course, the first time you will need to use the export wizard to actually give to the front. So are we talking about the front end or the UX? Sorry.
I think it's the UX and design group. So yeah, I would say the
So, okay, so basically the tip is actually the same as any Sitecore solution. So the way how you would be doing the UX and design is exactly the same as for any other Sitecore solution. There is absolutely no difference in that. So nothing changes in that regard. So all the rules are being applied to there. So of course, we do not want to end up with the things such as, you know, triangular shapes which are overlapping and flying everywhere, which sometimes does happen when a design comes with something. But when it comes to the SXA, exactly the same as it was done for non-SXA site.
Okay, but are there any extra considerations that a UX or design team need to, like, is there anything extra that needs to be taken into consideration by them when they're designing or doing UX for an SXA site if the components are pre-built?
I think it would be nice for them to know what is actually inside of it. So it would be, for example, what I always like to do is before the actual project starts, I would prefer to gather the entire team and to give a little demo of what SXA has pre-built already. So for example, we have the form, this is what you can actually get. If we have this type of rendering, this is what you can get. So because previously we would always need to build all those things, but now because they're predefined, I would advise to actually do a little demo so they can see what is inside, and that can kind of give them ideas what you can actually use out of the box versus what you would actually need custom to build.
Okay, excellent. So we don't seem to have any more questions at the moment. So once again, I'm just going to direct people to the Women of Sitecore website. We do have forums there, and there is a form to join the Women of Sitecore Slack channel. If you do have any further questions around the content that Una's delivered today, feel free to communicate with the greater community there as well. On top of that, as Una mentioned, there is a second webinar that's more of a deep dive into SXA that will be on the 21st of December, and I believe it's the same time, but I'll make sure that that's publicized a little bit more as well there.
Yeah, the next webinar that is going to be done is really for developers. So it's going to be mainly doing things in Sitecore, so there's not going to be slides like this one.
So a little bit more hands-on for everybody. But once again, thank you to everybody that's attended today, and a big thank you to Una, who has taken time out of her day to share with us all of her knowledge about SXA as well. And yeah, so I'm going to end it here. And thank you again, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.